The drama's already started, isn't it? Because we've had some big news the last couple of days.
Big news the last couple of hours. So we're recording at the end of a week when Ineos have announced that neither Chris Froome nor Geraint Thomas will ride the Tour. That plenty more news has happened just today. We will get onto that very, very shortly. But let's start with Froome and G. The first time that neither have featured in the Tour since 2009.
Yeah.
Dave Brailsford, true to form, is picking on form.
Yeah, and all the opinions and views we've been given up to now have all been based on the assumption they would be riding. Obviously, there was a small question mark about Chris Froome and whether he'd get selected, but no one probably anticipated G not getting selected. And I think we probably take it as a given as a previous winner that his status in the team means that he would always be selected for the Tour. But, this is what makes Dave Brailsford such a good manager, probably why he's been so successful, really. And I experienced this myself within the team that, no one's really bigger than the team, and he can take that emotion to one side and select a team purely on his assets and the form guide, really. And this year's been a very, very peculiar year with everything that's gone on, and there wasn't much to go on in terms of form and, facts in terms of who's going to be in the best position to perform well. I mean, the season's, a month old now, and we're already at the Tour de France, so there's not been a lot of time to assess things, but Dave's now spreading his players, because 2 or 3 days after the Tour finishes, we've got the Giro, which is never happened before, and then of course not long after that we got the Vuelta, really. So they've made Egan as the previous winner, who's clearly the man, and they don't make these selections lightly. There's a lot of thought goes into it. There's a lot of numbers and facts, and Bernal's clearly the one that they are putting their money on, with also the addition of Carapaz, who's riding, of course, last year's Giro winner. We're looking at probably a two-pronged attack, really, and he's probably an outside bet. No one's really spoke about him at this stage, have we? And we don't know what condition he's in or what form. But the fact he's in that team ahead of Geraint, and that would suggest that he's going well. But I don't see it as a negative thing. I mean, it's as I say, they've always had this plan or goal to win all 3 Grand Tours in a season, and Geraint's got another month now to get himself into the shape he wants to be in, and the fact he's riding the Giro, you'd have to say he's going to be a contender for it.
We should say on Carapaz, so he was supposed to be doing the Giro. Obviously, he's been pulled into the Tour team. He was very impressive at the Tour of Poland, took a stage there. So it's fair to say we can expect big things from him comparatively in the Tour. Back to G and Froome, we've seen very dignified video messages from them both, which you'd imagine must have been very difficult to do, to front up to the camera, given that, both of them have made their career on the Tour de France. How are they going to be feeling? As an athlete, how are you going to be feeling? You've targeted the Tour all year. You've talked about coming back for the Tour in Froome's case. It's going to be very difficult for them emotionally, isn't it?
Well, I think it's more the external perception and external opinions that makes it hard, because people assume that they'll be disappointed or kind of upset or anything. So it's the continued questions, like the video messages, is he just saying that because he has to and, be professional in that? But as an athlete, as previous winners, they don't want to go to the Tour if they're not quite in the shape they were in the last few years and fall away from the GC and then have to ask questions during the Tour. They're professional athletes, and winning has become the standard now. Winning has become the norm in that team and the standard. In some cases, there is no second place now in the Tour for that team. And once you've won it, there is no second place for the likes of Geraint Thomas and Chris Froome, really. Chris finished 3rd in the Tour when G won it. And that's not his sort of defining point in his career where people go, oh, he finished 3rd in the Tour de France. It's Chris only finished 3rd. He didn't win it because he's won it so many times. And Dave, that's the respect he has for those guys, and they're his biggest players. So you'll spread them over the other 2 Grand Tours, which are just as important. And that's the they've got so many big players in that team that they can afford to do that. But no, G would be the first rider along with Luke Rowe on any Tour de France list, and you'd have to say G is equal to Luke Rowe in doing that job, because G can ride on the flats, he can ride Paris-Roubaix, etc. The job that Luke Rowe does, Geraint could do for an Egan Bernal. But G's become too big now, and it's not beneath him. It's not that. It's just, there's a chance for him to win the Giro d'Italia. So why would Dave put G in the Tour to perform that role and finish 20th or 30th on GC when someone else could do that job, when G could have an opportunity. That, winning's the norm for those guys now, and G's at that standard where he should be targeting Grand Tours, and it's almost that he's not paid to do the role Luke Rowe is paid to do. He's paid to do that. So if Geraint had the form, he'd be in that Tour team, because you don't leave Geraint Thomas out of a Tour team and lightly. That's a big decision to make, and Geraint would have been part of that decision. He's one of the best teammates I've ever had. He's committed. He's hard. Nothing phases him. He's good to have around. He's so calm. Nothing really gets to him. And so Geraint will be the first to say, I don't think I'm in the form to be a potential winner of that race, although I could perform a role up the first parts of the mountain and then maybe fall away towards the top. It's, Dave would have said, well, you're better than that. 4 more weeks training and you can win the Giro. And that's what they're going to do. And G would have been part of that decision. So I imagine that it's a relief more than anything, because you think of the pressure he would have been under the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, where he's going, not quite where I was this time last year. God, the Tour's only 4 weeks away. And once the decision's announced and made, there's almost a relief, because going into the Tour de France, you're never going to go into the Tour and say, I'm actually not in the condition I was last year, because you're never going to give that away as an athlete to your competitors. So there's a pressure there that that I'm probably going to get dropped at some point because I haven't got the form I did have last year. And when you do get dropped, then how do you feel? You've fallen away. Are you disappointed? It's like, well, I kind of knew this was going to happen. I just, hoped that something might turn out. So he'll be relieved. Froome's on a forward trajectory from where he's come from, as he said in his message. Where he was this time last year. And he's got a chance to win the Vuelta. I mean, that I wouldn't put it past him, but he'll certainly be up there. And he's got another 8 weeks now to get ready for that. So it is what it is. As I said, they don't make these decisions lightly. There's a lot of thought process, a lot of facts and evidence and numbers that go into it. And ultimately, it's about the team winning and not nationalities or emotions and loyalties. And everyone is part of that decision in that team.
You said it will give Froome forward momentum. I mean, in terms of his next season with Israel Startup Nation, is that what he's going to be looking at now? So he's targeting the Vuelta and he can roll that into his new season? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, he's... as you say, he's every week he'll be progressing and getting better and seeing improvement. The Tour's probably, if it'd been in July, it'd have been too soon for him, so he wouldn't have made. But the romantic vision we had of him coming back and winning the Tour after the horrendous accident last year was probably asking too much of him, really, or maybe, kind of in an ideal world. But for sure, I mean, what's the Vuelta? November this year?
It will finish in November, so it will begin the last week of October.
Yeah, and then obviously there's 2 months, and Chris Froome will probably start racing in earnest in January next year. So this is actually going to assist him in many ways, because he's not got an off-season that he's going to have to contend with now. He'll just carry on straight through next year. And by the time we get to the Tour de France next year, all being well and no outbreaks of corona, etc., with a new team, they've made some big signings the last few weeks. We could certainly say that Chris Froome will be back at the Tour de France as a leader next year, because he's signed for that team as a leader, going for number 5. What that means for Geraint Thomas now, especially with the addition of Carapaz, and if he performs at the Tour this year and gets up there, how does Geraint Thomas break back into that sort of system? And that it's so, once you miss a Tour in that setup, there's always someone else that could step into that position, and then it almost becomes difficult to reassert yourself, as happened last year with Bernal, and there was question marks who's going to lead. Can Geraint, as a previous winner, which obviously started back when I was doing it with Chris Froome. So it shows you the strength and depth in that team and the forward planning. And of course, the news today, which also broke for next year, the new addition of
Adam Yates signing for Ineos. So I mean, it's. I was going to come on to it will be the first time this year for Ineos or Sky as they were, where they're not going to be gunning for a Brit on GC. So it feels very much like an end of an era.
Well, yeah. I was speaking to Mark Cavendish during the week about this, and that it's been 10 years, isn't it? And a British team at the Tour de France, a British winner, and we've had a few now, and obviously Egan last year for Colombia. So yeah, but it's the first time now. You almost get a sense that although the team has largely got some British contenders, and next year, if Adam comes along, I think he's the next one they're going to start to build as the next British Tour winner. If you consider that Geraint Thomas and Froome are into their sort of 30s and will be in their mid-30s in a couple of years. So they're now looking at Adam Yates. That's the one they seem to have gone for. But it does feel like, the mantra and the kind of what they were all about has sort of, gone over the years to this point, really. And I think it's now not a British team at the Tour de France, really, is it? Although it's a British-backed team, et cetera, British-led, and a history of British riders and a culture there. They've kind of achieved that now, haven't they, that whole British thing? And they have transitioned into, it's just an international team now that needs to win. And they achieved that goal, and they're 10 years in now, and the whole plan, the mission sort of statement has changed, and it has to, I suppose. They can't keep to that thing that it always has to be a British winner. I mean, they've got the backing as well and the finance to have 4 or 5 big leaders as well, which also helps. But that does not take away anything from the professionalism and the planning that goes in, and Dave at the helm, etc. So they'll be the favourites for the Tour this year. One of them.
They're still your favourites.
Yeah.
An Ineos rider will still win the Tour.
Yeah, I mean, Roglic seems in supreme form. He could really challenge, but depending how much this crash has affected him in the Dauphiné, hopefully we'll still see him up there. And obviously Jumbo are still the team to rival them with Dumoulin, etc. Kruijswijk, he's going to be out now, isn't he?
Kruijswijk will now do the Giro, but they've still got a supreme lineup. So they've got Roglic, Dumoulin, George Bennett, Sepp Kuss, who was on brilliant form at the Dauphiné and took the final stage so impressively too. Robert Hessink, Tony Martin, and of course the man of the rebooted season so far in Wout van Aert.
Yeah, I mean, I would say they've got, across the board, they've got a stronger, complete squad than Ineos, but Ineos have probably got 1 or 2 the star players, kind of over Jumbo, although that's not to take anything away from Jumbo. I mean, they're very evenly matched, but still Ineos probably still have the edge. But Jumbo, with the strength in depth they've got across the whole board, they're going to have numbers every day in that final. And that's probably something that Ineos considered when selecting that team, because you throw Geraint Thomas into that Ineos team straight away, it evens it up slightly. But Bernal and Carapaz, what it might mean is we don't see the legendary Sky train or the Ineos train like we used to. And we didn't see that last year, and there was a lot of talk about that. They're not doing the train like they did in the past, but they got the job done. And they did lack in numbers a lot last year at crucial moments, although they still won. And that's where Jumbo will probably be stronger than them. And that might come into it in terms of outgunning Ineos.
Do we expect Jumbo to control the race in the same way that we might have seen the Sky train of old?
It depends on who takes the jersey and how late on. I mean, obviously Bernal took the jersey quite late into the race last year. So I took the jersey after 7 days and we defended for 14. So it wasn't like we were ever going to lose the jersey and try and play a tactical race so we didn't have to ride. So it's just how the race pans out. And there's no time trial in that first week, is there? Or second week?
The only time trial
right
is the penultimate stage 2, La Planche de Belfi.
Last year we had a time trial, didn't we? And had there been a time trial this year, someone like Roglic could have maybe took the jersey, and then you've no choice but to defend and ride. So, as I said the other week, I think this is going to come down to the last day. And that could be a bit of cat and mouse throughout the race as to who takes up the ride in, who does this. And there might be a bit of a bit of stalemate at times. And that's where the likes of Thibaut Pinot could benefit, as we did last year when he sort of jumped around. So I think it's going to make for a really good race.
Just bring us round full circle on Froome and G's exclusion from the Tour squad. From your own experience, how does Dave B deal with that? Does he come to you, knock on your door and say, look, I'm sure you saw this coming? He's been described as stabbing his riders in the front.
No, he doesn't. It's not like that at all. There's constant communication, especially with the trainers, etc. And, he'll be in communication with Geraint and Froome all the time. And they'll foresee this, It's not a case of like getting to a week from the Tour and everyone wondering what Dave's thinking and then announcing it, go, I didn't make it. Like when you sort of the classic see the team sheet in the changing room before you go out to I didn't make the team, I'm on the bench.
Yeah, will you make the World Cup squad?
It's not really like that. And I've seen, going back to football, I've seen like Sir Gary Neville talking about why Alex Ferguson was so good in that he would talk to him and say, look, there's this game this weekend's not for you, but in 2 weeks I'm really going to need you, and that's probably how good management works like that. And Dave would have been in constant communication. So G would have said to him a month ago, perhaps not where I am this time last year, but we still got 4 weeks, etc. And then they'll go to training camp and the numbers will correlate with that. And so Dave would reassure him at that point and say, well, look, we'll keep going. It's been a strange year because it's not the end of the world if you don't make the Tour, because we could always got the Giro afterwards, and reassure him like that. So don't panic, just keep going. It's been a tough year for everyone. G's not letting the team down because they've still got other people that can do that. And so that it would have been handled like that. So they probably made this decision after the Dauphiné, really. And G probably would be the first to say, I'm probably not, kind of where I was this time last year, but I'll be good enough to do a job for Egan. And Dave would have said, well, you're a winner, G, and, we want to put you in the best position to win the biggest race in the world. We've got other riders that can do that job. So why don't you go for the Giro? And you've got a chance to win the Giro. And don't worry about the Tour. Don't stress about it. And G would have been part of that decision. And Chris would have been the same. So that's how they operate. And that's how they keep the morale up and the function. They give the respect to the riders in that sense.
Given they've got another GC man coming in Adam Yates, does G stick around long term?
This is the way the team goes, isn't it? They're always thinking ahead. And obviously with Adam coming in now, Carapaz, Bernal's already sort of made his mark in that team. Adam coming in. But yeah, I mean, this is the difficulty they have every year is once you've won a Tour and someone else steps into that position, it's like we're now asking the question like we did with the Froome a few times, will G ever win another Tour now? What does this mean for G? And that's it's moved to G now. And, that probably started with me years ago. So it's the nature of the team. It's I had described it in the past as cutthroat, and that might be a bit harsh, but it's the reality of elite sport in that, no one's bigger than the team, and it's about the team winning ultimately and not the individuals, because that's the duty they have to the sponsors that are paying the money. And we'll see. G will be part of that decision as well, and I'm sure he's got the capability to win another Tour, that's for sure. Whether he does or not, if Egan wins his second Tour now and dominates next season, etc., then it's clear that G's going to struggle to get back to that leadership role.